A charismatic leader, one who has risen above all others, speaks to the multitudes. They have waited for him. They believe in him. They expect he will heal the world's ills. Some say he is the Messiah, finally returned. But this man is not a savior. He is the King of Terror, who will usher in the end of everything. For thousands of years, prophets around the world have predicted the end of days. More than one suggests the apocalypse is fast approaching. We call this theoretical convergence between doomsday prophecies and today's events the Nostradamus effect. The Antichrist, the false Messiah, a child of Satan. The word Antichrist first appears in the New Testament. In this ancient text, there is a prophecy that states the Antichrist, the beast, will come to seduce mankind. Instead, believers say he will usher in the end of days, Armageddon.
The Antichrist is a man who receives the power of Satan.
The Antichrist, of course, represents the devil on earth. He is a false Messiah. That's exactly what he is.
We will examine the theory that the Antichrist is already among us. Who is the Antichrist? Who predicted his arrival? If prophecies are to be believed, do they connect to more than one warning about such a figure? And are they linked to events in our own time, in a web of convergence? We will neither refute nor endorse these theories, merely present the evidence. The word Antichrist has its origins in religion, combining the Greek anti, instead of or in place of, with Christ or Christos, the Anointed.
What it refers to is a period in the early church when various groups were starting to split off, each of them understanding Christ's teachings in their own unique way, and each of them denouncing all the others as heretical. So from the point of view of any one of these groups, everybody else was an antichrist.
Other religions have their own malevolent figures, but only the religions in the Judaic tradition have an Antichrist.
The term Antichrist is literally only alluded to really in Islam besides Judaism and Christianity. And they have their imposter Messiah. And he will come on the scene in the last days, much like the Antichrist in the Bible will come on the scene in the last days.
In Islam, he is called Masih ad-Dajjal, or the impostor. Some biblical interpreters believe that just as Jesus is the Son of God, the Antichrist is considered the son of Satan.
In spirituality, the enemy of Christ himself is the Antichrist. Even as God the Father sent Jesus Christ the Son, theoretically, Satan himself will send this man on the planet to be the enemy of all that is good.
One of the earliest of the biblical Antichrist prophecies comes from the New Testament, in the book of Revelation. It describes the Antichrist's arrival in the world.
Let him that hath understanding count the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man, and his number is 666.
How is this ancient prophecy entwined with other, later prophecies about the Antichrist? Prophecies that may be an example of the Nostradamus effect. For some, the key may lie with Nostradamus himself.
Nostradamus was a messenger of the divine plan. He would have been interested in the Antichrist because he would want the human race to know what they were facing in the future, specifically toward the end times.
Nostradamus began publishing all of his prophecies, including his visions of the Antichrist, in the mid-16th century.
Nostradamus straddled this really obscure line between magic and science, between heresy and conformity.
His prophecies consist of 10 books called centuries, each consisting of 4-lined poems called quatrains. It was within these writings that Nostradamus revealed his visions of the Antichrist.
Nostradamus categorically believed that his gift of prophecy was a gift from God. It was his responsibility to alert the world to these things.
Some suggest that the visions he experienced were horrible and confusing, a mix of unrecognizable technology and staggering violence.
Try to imagine what it would be like if you had the ability to open a window to 500 years ahead into the future, and you saw fantastic things that went against everything you believed. What would you do with that?
He attempted to describe them in his writings.
One who the infernal gods of Hannibal will cause to be reborn, terror to all mankind.
Nostradamus dedicated a number of quatrains to Antichrist prophecy. Followers of his quatrains confirmed that Nostradamus did not see just one Antichrist. He saw 3 Antichrists, each appearing in his own time, each worse than the last.
Nostradamus is unique in the history of prophecy. All other traditions, East and West, have one Antichrist, but he has 3.
Experts say Nostradamus wrote of 2 Antichrists that have since come and gone, leaving unparalleled destruction and bloodshed in their wake. Many insist that the final part of this prophecy has yet to come true. They suggest that the 3rd false prophet may be destined to wreak havoc in our own time, and that he may be among us right now. Some believe that the key to unlocking the mystery of the 3rd Antichrist may be found in the identities of the first 2, and that clues revealing who they are could be found in Nostradamus's quatrains.
An emperor will be born near Italy. He will cost his empire very dearly.
In this quatrain, it is suggested that Nostradamus prophesied the first Antichrist. Nostradamus predicts this destructive leader will come from southern Europe to plague his own people.
Napoleon was born near Italy, did bring his empire to ruin. In that quatrain, we have a story of a ruler who brought about disaster.
Is Napoleon the leader Nostradamus envisioned?
Century 1, quatrain 60 would seem to be a pretty good dead-on prediction, as close as Nostradamus comes to an identifiable prophecy which came true in a way that we can recognize.
The second Antichrist is even worse. Nostradamus writes that he too is European and possesses unprecedented powers of persuasion.
From the very depths of the west of Europe, a young child will be born of poor people. He who by his tongue will seduce a great troop.
Hitler was famous for his oratory, for leading a nation astray with his oratorical gift.
Once again, Nostradamus' prophecy seems to converge with an actual historical figure, one born centuries later, a man who very nearly conquered the world. Many believe that if Nostradamus successfully predicted the appearance of Napoleon and Hitler, his prophecy of the 3rd Antichrist is also likely to come true. Is this exaggerated doctrine or credible evidence? What are the exact links between these 3 alleged false prophets? A closer examination of Nostradamus' Antichrist quatrains may allow us to reveal the truth. Prophet Nostradamus predicted the arrival of 3 Antichrists, each building on the power of the last. Some believe the 3rd and most dangerous Antichrist may be among us now.
Things tend to go in 3s. In the esoteric world, we call it the law of 3s. So the basic idea was that there would be 3 people that would together, if you looked at the broad range of their history, completely change civilization.
Will an investigation of various threads of evidence help us judge the accuracy of the belief that the 3rd Antichrist will appear in our lifetime?
Most people already are looking for somebody to lead the world to a global peace, to solve these great crises that we have throughout the world. The Antichrist will be that Savior.
What clues are embedded in the quatrains of Nostradamus? Hints to help us identify the third and worst Antichrist. He warned,
At once one will see vengeance, 100 powers, thirst, famine.
Some suggest that this is a vision Nostradamus had of our current time, and that it proves the Antichrist is in our midst. In using the word vengeance, is he pointing to our current wars in Iraq, Afghanistan, the Far East, in our own inner cities? Could the seer's reference to thirst and famine describe the starvation that exists today in drought and poverty-stricken villages?
Nostradamus' genius may not have been as a seer or a prophet, but as a surrealist poet. His verses are broken, they're hard to understand, and they seem to speak to certain levels of the human mind that aren't always that easy to approach.
1555, Provence, France. Nostradamus sits in his secluded study. He appears to embark on a psychic journey in search of answers.
He hears a voice at a certain point, and suddenly there's a shaking through his robes, and then a terror, followed by a divine splendor. And then he hears the God speak.
Is Nostradamus really seeing the future? Evidence suggests Nostradamus identified the first Antichrist in one especially cryptic quatrain.
All, nay, Oleron, will be more of fire than blood.
Many believe this is Nostradamus' first Antichrist prophecy. He wrote it in 1555.
Paul, Ney, Oleron are three towns in southwest France. The fact that the first three words are in bold font, uppercase. It's like, nudge, 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 I'm saying something here that you should look a second time at.
For those who see prophecy in his work, Nostradamus is trying in this quatrain to reveal the identity of the first Antichrist by placing him in France.
When you rearrange the letters of these three small towns, they spell out Napoleon Roy, Napoleon the King.
Lois spelled R-O-Y in the Old French for R-O-I.
Napoleon Bonaparte, one of history's most notorious tyrants. Is this quatrain proof that the Emperor of France was the first Antichrist prophesied? Did Nostradamus see Napoleon's arrival on the world stage 233 years before he came to power?
An emperor will be born near Italy. He will cost his empire very dearly.
Born in Corsica, about 30 miles from Italy, Napoleon proclaimed himself Emperor of France in 1799. He presented himself as a champion and savior of his people.
Historians see Napoleon as a hero, a savior of France, during a time that France was economically suppressed, during a time when France needed a savior. He came as a false messiah, one who dominated the entire population and even crowned himself.
People that follow him create evil. In other words, he influences people.
According to Nostradamus, the ability to appear as a savior and seduce entire populations is characteristic of the Antichrist. But for interpreters of the prophecies, additional clues point to Napoleon as the first Antichrist, including Nostradamus' veiled warning to a Catholic pope of approaching danger.
Roman Pontiff, beware of approaching. Out of the city which the two rivers water, in that place you will come to spit your blood.
In fact, Napoleon held Pope Pius VI prisoner in the town of Valence, where he later died vomiting blood in the month of August. Valence can be found at the confluence of two rivers. Followers of the famed seer say even Napoleon's contemporaries saw the likeness of the emperor in the writings of Nostradamus.
Various prophecies in Nostradamus' verses, nor even applied to him in Napoleon's own time. One, for example, bearing a name which no French king passed on to him. That is to say, no one else was named Napoleon in the French monarchy, and he wasn't part of the old Bourbon ruling family. More fearsome than a thunderbolt tremble Italy, Spain, and England, all of whom Napoleon either invaded or fought with. So this kind of prophecy has been very easily applied to Napoleon.
But it is believed that perhaps the level of havoc and bloodshed committed in Napoleon's name has most aptly branded him Antichrist. Nostradamus seems clear that the supposed first Antichrist, too, will be soaked in blood.
That he is less a prince than a butcher.
Certainly Napoleon was responsible for the deaths of many people. When he invaded Russia in 1812, his army starting out was 600,000 men. When he went back defeated, it was 18,000.
He is the first Antichrist because one of the things they all share is a great shedding of blood. And that was the first big modern shedding of blood from Napoleon.
Responsible one way or another for 3.5 million deaths, likely more than any other single human being before him, many conclude that Napoleon does fit the description of the first Antichrist. The quatrains further state,
"But the French nation will fear the hour, north wind, the army having pushed too far."
Even his wintry defeat after pushing too far into Russia, the north wind, seems to be echoed in Nostradamus' quatrains. Did Napoleon himself believe he was the first Antichrist Nostradamus prophesied? Evidence suggests the emperor was drawn to his writings.
Napoleon traveled with a collection of Nostradamus' prophecies on his bedside table. Unfortunately, they were forgeries.
At the turn of the 19th century, Napoleon ordered a genocide in France's colony in Haiti. His troops slaughtered as many as 100,000 slaves, gassing some of them with sulfur dioxide in the holds of French ships. A preview of genocide to come. Experts on Nostradamus' Antichrist prophecy believe Napoleon's actions created the conditions for a second and third Antichrist to follow, each who would ravage mankind, just as Nostradamus prophesied.
If you did not have a Napoleon Bonaparte, you would not have had the steps which would have led to a unification of Germany later in the 19th century, which led to the second Antichrist, which created the modern world that created the atmosphere for the oncoming and third and final Antichrist.
There is no doubt that Napoleon's trail of misery and destruction marks him as one of history's monsters, and if prophecy is to be believed, he is more, perhaps the first Antichrist foretold by Nostradamus. Are there really multiple links between Nostradamus and Napoleon Bonaparte? And are they more than coincidence? How strong is the connection between Napoleon and our second alleged Antichrist, Adolf Hitler? Is it possible that these connections will lead us to identify the third Antichrist? If the Nostradamus effect is true, have the warnings in ancient texts and prophecies from Nostradamus himself converged to suggest that the end of days has actually begun? What, if any, would be the signs of Armageddon?
"I will take the Israelites out of the nations where they have gone. I will gather them from all around and bring them back into their own land."
God said throughout the Old Testament that in the last days, I will draw my people from the four corners of the earth back to the land of their forefathers, Palestine. That literally opened the curtain for the Antichrist to come on the scene.
We are examining whether an Antichrist of biblical proportions has arrived to accelerate the chaos and destruction witnessed in the modern world. The quatrains of Nostradamus suggest that this Antichrist will be the last of three false messiahs. His arrival will be immediately preceded by a second evil, one who creates the conditions for the last of Nostradamus' Antichrists to destroy the world. For centuries, followers of Nostradamus have examined his quatrains for clues to the identity of the second Antichrist.
From the very depths of the west of Europe,